Hi, it's Todd of Todd's Workshop here, and today we're going to be looking at mounting a mace head, making a mace. So I have a raw head here, just a head on its own, and this is a finished one that I've done. Now, I've actually turned up this shaft here on a lathe, so of course it gives it a very neat, very well finished appearance. It wasn't always done like that, of course, and it's not the way that you have to do it. I'm lucky enough to have a lathe, you may not. So I'll show you how we can do it by hand. So it's going to be a case of taking the square blank, planing that down into a round or a close to round, tapering it because it's a bit narrower by the head, and then cutting the step down so it fits through the head and you get the very neat finish here. And then of course we don't want the head to come off, so we'll just cut the slots there for the wedges, drive the wedges in. We have the tools we're going to use for mounting the mace head onto the shaft. So we've got a plane to turn it from a square into a round and then to taper it. We've got some rasps or surforms. Really they come by a sort of a few different names, but rasp files there. And we can use those to rough out the shape of the grip and then sandpaper to smooth it all down. A pen and tape to help with the marking. And then the saw, which we're going to use for cutting down around where the mace head fits on, where it sockets on, and then for cutting the slots for the wedges. So the first stage is to get a piece of ash which is square. Now your lumber yard or your timber yard will be able to cut that for you. Ash is a lot more common in America, I believe, in timber yards than it is in the UK, but it's still gettable in the UK and I'm sure across the rest of Europe. Try and get a piece with the grain running nice and parallel so that it's all within the shaft. That will make for the toughest thing. Ash is tough as hell anyway, and even if the grain wanders slightly, you'll still find something that you'll very, very difficult to break. So it's square, so the first thing we do is we put it in. So basically one corner is straight upwards. You're looking for those angles to be the same, about 45 degrees. And then just start to put a flat onto it with a plane. It's as simple as that. But we now have a bit of a flat on there, and that will go against the jaws and the vice. And we can use that sort of in engineering terms as a register. So now, this one will be exactly 90 degrees different to the first. So we just keep doing that. And then what we're looking for, we're going to keep doing it, and we're going to get a perfect octagon when the width of these new flats here that we're putting on it are the same as the width of the flat that's left. So I'll do the next step and you'll see. Now you can see that I've planed that to be, fairly close to a perfect octagon. So that'll be good enough for the next one. So what we now do is we turn that 8-sided into a 16-sided. So basically, I now start to just plane off these corners as well, here. And then we'll end up with something that's very nearly round. Ash is a funny old wood, and it planes well in one way and often it tears in another, and I'm getting a teary spot there, so I'm going to turn it around and it should plane very nicely now at this direction, which it does. It's just one of those things about ash. It tears in one way, planes nicely in another. So we've now ended up with a length of ash which is basically round. It's got technically 16 faces on it, but of course as you plane you never really quite go flat, so there's a little bit of curvature to it. So it's essentially a round object now. Now if we look at the mace head, that's actually quite a lot bigger than the shaft there. It just looked weird if you put it on the end. So what we're going to do now is we're going to taper the shaft down. That sounds like it's difficult, but actually it's a very straightforward process. So what you do is you pop it back in the vise again, and you start by doing multiple cuts getting longer. So what I mean by that is you can just do a short one, then you drag it back, you start here now, do a bit longer, you start back, a bit longer. Now what that means is, of course, quite naturally you're removing more material at the end because you've cut over that surface, say 4 times or 5 times, instead of just the once that you've done that cut. So if you keep on again, turning it round as you go, you'll end up with something which should be about round there and tapering all the way down. And then obviously you can dress it with the plane to make it rounder. So I'm just going to set that at 90 degrees. It just helps. So again, nice and quick. I'm pushing forward now, so you get a shortcut at the end. A bit longer, a bit more. And so, like I said, you've got 4 or 5 cuts at the end here for the one cut that you've got there, and you've got sort of 3 cuts here. So that way you get this taper. So we'll just go around again, and this will be the last of the first 4. So you can see now it's sort of squaring off slightly. And I'll just keep this process going until we end up with a nice taper that I like. So what we have now is a mace haft which is tapered. So it's about 38mm at the end here and about 31 at the bottom here. So as you can see now, it fits the mace head, very nicely there, tidy, and is obviously much bigger there. So it just wouldn't look good as the original size started out. So now it'll fit there nicely. You can see it's pretty much round. So we're going to mark it off to get it to fit onto, mark it off and cut it to get it to socket onto the end there nicely. So that'll be the next step. So the first thing we'll do is we need to mark a line all the way around it neatly. Now I could do it with a pen, but I'm invariably going to wobble a little bit. The easiest way, if you have a set of verniers, is you measure this and you give it another little bit, so about like that. And you basically use it like a divider. Then you just scrape a line. So now I've got a nice marked line on here. If you haven't got that, one of those, and you're trying to do it with a pen, you inevitably will wobble and your 2 lines won't line up. So a really good tip is you get just a bit of tape and you stick it down, and you can just guide it around, and you see now I've got a perfect line here, and I use that tape as a cut line. That's another way of doing it. So now I'm just going to pop that back into the vise, and I'm going to use my saw to just mark that. So it's a usual story, I'm just using the edge of my thumb. If you don't know how to use a saw, this might not be the project for you. So I'm using that now. All the way around. And we'll just have a look. So when I sink my mace onto there, a little bit of wood will be sticking out the end. And that's actually generally quite important. It helps to stop the mace head coming off, because the wood will mushroom out, it will splay out over the edges of the mace head, and it will just help to lock it in solid. So don't think that the wood has to be absolutely flush with the end of the mace head. That actually makes for a weaker mace in the end. So what I'll do is I'm just taking this down now to where I think roughly it should be, and then we will sand it all flat, file it flat. So I'll file this off now and just start to try and fit this on. So there's nothing clever about it, it's just a little bit of elbow grease. Just constantly file a bit, turn a bit, and just keep doing that. Trying to keep it round. So now I've filed the peg that's going to go into the mace head on the end here. Because I marked it with the either the tape or the verniers, rather than doing it by eye, I've got a nice crisp edge here. I've filed it so it's almost perfectly round. I mean, as round as it needs to be here. So that now seats down. And actually what I will do when it comes to actually seating it, I'll give it a whack down with a hammer as well. But can you see there's just a little bit of wood sticking out the end there? That'll maybe double in size when I hammer it down, hammer the mace head on. So now we're going to cut the crosses for the V's. I like to do, rather than just one, I like to do a pair. So we'll do that. So very simply you do them at 90 degrees. So not all the way down, maybe about 2/3. So you can see here, I've just cut a cross on the end and gone down, well that one I'll take down a bit further, but about 2/3 of the way through. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to mark where the back of the grip section goes here. So we'll just bring it in a little bit, because if you make this too thin here, the wood will chip out. So we'll bring it up maybe 15mm, a bit more than half an inch. And then again, put another mark there for the end of the grip. It's a reenactment thing these days, that what you do is you make the grips massive, so that, you know, if you've got really big hands in your really big gauntlet on a really bad day, your hand will fit. Well, they weren't like that. They were tight and they were snug. Because the idea on any mace grip or dagger grip is when you grip it tight, you are squashing your hand in there, so you get something really positive. So I'm not going to put a big grip on this. It shouldn't be a big grip. It should be small and it should be tight. Just marking here, just scraping it around, and that just gives me a line. It's just an easy way of doing it. Now actually, this one is going to be too far up for the vernier, so I'm going to go the tape method. So, about there I think. We can always adjust this line afterwards. So I'm just putting the tape there and just cranking it around. There we go. So now we've got a nice clean line all the way around. So I'm going to do those saw cuts like I did before and then hit it with the file. So I'm not going to bore you with that. So I've filed this down now. And what I'm going to do is just use some sandpaper to put a bit of a radius into the corners here. It makes it a bit nicer to hold, a bit nicer to look at. I don't have a good sort of rasp or anything that's going to get in there, so I've just used a regular metal file. It's just round and it's got a handle on it, which is why I'm using it, and some rough sandpaper, this is 80 grit, just wrapped around it. I find that the jaws of the vise, just a little bit open like this, just allows me to hold it and to work it. So I'm just going to go around here, basically just putting a bit of a radius in, and it stops it being what's called a stress razor. On anything which takes an impact load or sudden loads, sharp corners are really not to be desired. So, you know, the tang on a sword, or it's one of the reasons you see round windows and round portholes on ships, because they flex. You don't want a sharp corner like you have in a window in a house. And it's the same here. You want a nice radius on any sort of area which is going to take a stress. And a mace, of course, is a piece that takes quite a lot of stress. The mace is now all smooth. The head fits on well. Yeah, it's looking good. It's feeling good. Nice tight grip to the hand. What I've done on this one that I turned, I just put some grooves in there, and maybe sometimes I put some up here. It's, you know, it's different every time, just for a bit more added grip. So we'll just put a little bit of that on here. Now again, I use the tape trick, if we can get that. So we've got a nice crisp line there, and then I'll just do one central line on the grip. Now, and then what I do is I use a square file this time. This is an engineering file, a metal file, but to be honest, we're removing very little wood. So actually it'll be fine for this. So I just track it around, just following that tape line. So the line here I've just put in with the file is now set there, and I can use that now to get it deeper. But the thing is, what it's done is it's given me a line to follow for the next tool to follow in it as well. So now I'm just going in with that round metal file again, or any old rod, really, doesn't matter, old screwdriver handle, whatever you got, with a bit of rough sandpaper on it, just to put that groove in, and we'll do the same again here. So just a little bit of detail, and you know, when you put linseed oil on this, I mean this is how I treat mine with linseed, it'll really bring it out. So it might not show too much now, but you know, it really will. So that's it. So it's nice and tight. That fits nicely on the end. We'll put a couple of wedges in. So now we're going to cut the wedges for the end here. So what I'm looking to do is cut one wedge that's that width, and then two which are sort of half the width, because they'll go the other side of it. And what I'm looking for is a hard, straight grain timber for that. Oak is very good. I happen to have a bit of boxwood here, which is nice and hard. and so I can use this. So really I'm going to just file it down and get it down so that we've got a wedge that we can drive in. So just a little bit of work. So you can see the power of a rasp here. They're fantastic at removing wood. I have now the mace head that fits on the shaft very well. My wedges, which you can see are a little tapered, and they will fit in there. I'm just making sure before I do anything else that the 3 wedges will all fit together at the same time. So that'll all fit nicely. Now, the angle on those is very, very sharp, very acute. What that means is that if you drive them in, there is no way that they'll slip out. So you don't need to worry about getting glue into here. Sometimes it will just help a little to lubricate the wedges and drive them in further, or allow them to be driven in further, but really I don't do that. But what I do, which might surprise you a little, is this is metal, this is wood, obviously. Wood glue does not stick to metal, but what it does do, you get little imperfections in here, is it will fill those and sort of, and dry, and mechanically interlock it. And so actually what I do is I just put a little bit of glue on this shaft here. Even though it doesn't sort of technically glue to the metal, it helps to lock it in and help it stay in place. So that's now going on. Way up. Great. That's all nicely seated. I'm just going to make sure that this mace head is well seated on the shaft. So I'm just going to put it there. So what I've done is I've opened the jaws wide enough so the end of the shaft will go down through the jaws, and I'll whack the end of that with a hammer and just drive the whole thing down very hard. So here we go. So that's it now. So I'm now going to drive the largest of the wedges in. I'm being careful not to hit at the angle, because if you hit sort of not square down, it can actually shatter the wedge, and then it's not going to be as secure as you would want. Alright. That appears to be about as deep as it wants to go. Now if you just have a look here, you see those splits on either side now, they have actually closed up a little bit through this action. Now I'm just going to very gently tap a screwdriver in there just to open them up a bit, and I've also put quite almost like a cold chisel edge on the end of my wood, on the end of my little wedges there, and that will help to get them to fit in. There we go. Now the next wedges go in. So these are the little wedges either side. Just going to drive this last of the wedges in. And then really, this is the end of it now. We just cut off now you can see I've left them a little bit proud. And in fact, all of the wood is a little bit proud. And what I can do now is just hammer like crazy on the end here, and that wood will actually just mushroom out a little, almost a bit like a rivet. And that really will stop it going anywhere. There we go. So that's it. That mace head is not coming off. I hope you found today's tutorial useful, and if you want to have a go at mounting your own mace head, you'll find all of these and more available at toddcutler.com.